So, should we bring in the closer?
I think it'd be a good time for that.
All right.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Free Baseball Podcast presented by the Athletes Hub. It's episode number 87, closing in on 90 episodes. You mean closer to illustrious 100 episodes for the boys. As always, I'm Davis Burt, and I'm joined by number one Colorado Rockies fan, Jake Crumpler.
I felt it was a Rockies podcast, right? We got
Yeah, it is
an induction that is related. So yeah, I had to show up prepared as always. I've got a permanent Rockies fixture. The one closest to me, that's Charlie Blackmon. This one also related to the Hall of Fame. That's Joe Mauer from high school.
That's sick. We'll talk about them at length right now because we're going to get into the Hall of Fame inductees for 2024. Since the results came out yesterday, 3 players will join Jim Leyland, and that's Adrian Beltre, Joe Mauer, and Todd Helton. Like Jake said earlier, a few missing out pretty close, a couple getting in kind of by the skin of their teeth. Does this feel like the right 3 to be in right now for you, Jake?
I mean, there were definitely some snubs, but I'm not gonna qualm. I don't have any qualms with the players that did get inducted, so that's all fine and dandy with me.
Yeah, I think so too. Did you see the Mariners tweet about Beltre?
I did not. What was it?
It was funny. They were just congratulating him. That was the only place where he was average or mid, like in his entire career was with Seattle.
I think you're misremembering.
Oh, you can go back and look at his stats.
No, I mean you're misremembering that he actually was booty cheeks with the Red Sox.
I guess he was solid for like a year or so.
No, I'm wrong. He was great with the Red Sox.
Jake's misremembering.
Oh my gosh. No. Yeah, he was pretty
fake ball knowledge.
Well, he was also not great with the Dodgers other than that 1 year. Yeah, you're right. I was misremembering.
Yeah, because I saw Yankee World was clowning on Twitter. It was funny. But yeah, I think these 3 are definitely deserving Hall of Famers. I kind of thought that some of the numbers would be a little bit closer. Joe Mauer is one that I sort of thought had a chance to be first ballot, but I really didn't think he was going to end up there, especially with how the numbers were kind of polling. Todd Helton, though, I'm super stoked about that one. I kind of banged the drum for him last year, and I think he's been one where, we talk about the Rockies and it being a Rockies podcast, and I think this now kind of puts the Coors debate completely to bed. Like, I think you can't use this as an excuse anymore. You got Todd Helton, you have Larry Walker now. I think this should open the door for future discussions. But, yeah, I'm super stoked about all 3 of these guys. Definitely deserve it to go in with Jim Leyland. What else would you like to talk about in terms of the Hall of Fame, Jake? I
thought Adrian Beltre was like a clear first ballot Hall of Famers. That one was cool. I thought it was goofy though that what was it, like 5% of voters that
it was 95%. If you're one of the 5% that didn't vote for Adrian Beltre, you're an asshole. Like there's no reason to not vote for him. That guy is the only reason they didn't vote for him was so that he wouldn't be unanimous, which is stupid in and of itself because they've already kind of like, if you're going to get past that point, they've already had one before. If you're going to be like, no player should be unanimous Hall of Famer, you've already done that. So the mystique behind it is gone. Just vote in the guys that need to be in. Just make a decision that makes sense, please.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it was either that or they didn't believe him to be a first ballot Hall of Famer, which is also pretty ridiculous. The guy had 93.5 Baseball Reference WAR, so he was definitely far and above I think he's like a top 3 third baseman all time.
He is. I think he's third on Jaws. I really think he was third for Jaws.
Yeah, just an incredible career from him. So I think that's crazy not to vote for him. But hey, he got in on the first year. I don't think people, when you walk through the halls of the Hall of Fame, you're not looking at the plaque of Adrian Beltre and being like, dang, but what percentage did he get when he got voted in? I think it just matters. Yes or no, did you get in? Same can be said for someone like Todd Helton, who took 6 years to get in. And you talked about the narrative around Rockies players getting in. So I think it's awesome to see Todd Helton get in. He really was great for such a long time. I think it's cool that he played his whole career with just one team, and despite playing in the peak of the Coors Field era, his stats on the road were a testament to his abilities as a baseball player. And that's why he got in. And it didn't take him the full 10 years. 6 years is a pretty long wait, though. So I think that's awesome for him. And then Joe Mauer. Yeah, I think that one was the most interesting one because there has been so much debate since he retired over the past 5 years about, or is it 5 years? Yeah, it's 5 years after
Yeah.
the about whether or not he was Hall of Fame worthy. You're comparing him to other catchers that have gotten in and with the players of his era. And while his peak was incredible, maybe the peak of one of the best catchers of all time because of his abilities behind the plate and at the plate, but also the recognition he got by awards voters while he was active. But then you have like the whole majority of his career where he's like an average first baseman. But I think it's great. I think the older I get, the more I'm a big Hall guy. So, get everybody in there that is
Mhm.
close or deserving. And so that's awesome to see him get in. And it bodes well for one of my favorite players, Buster Posey. I think that basically guarantees him a first ballot Hall of
Oh
Fame
yeah,
as
for
well.
sure.
So, and probably Yadier Molina too. But yeah, that's
Yeah.
really awesome to see Joe Mauer get in because I think even if you're just not considering, if you're looking at the whole picture, he's a great guy. He was a legend for the Twins,
Mhm.
and he was a legend just in his hometown. And his peak when he was winning MVP and batting titles, he was just so incredible. Back to back cover of MLB The Show as well. All these guys are super deserving. Do you want to talk about the guys that you think should have gotten in, and maybe the guys
Um,
that got knocked off the ballot after that?
Sure. I think there's obviously the big one is Billy Wagner because Billy Wagner got just under 74%. He's actually, I think someone did the math and they said that he was 5 votes away from getting in, and 3 riders actually took him off their ballot, which is crazy because unless you're voting for 10 guys, you should never take anyone off your ballot unless they've done something egregious that sort of just eliminate them from the equation, like something like what Omar Vizquel did, in my opinion. And even though I think he kind of climbed or stayed around the same in terms of his voting, which is crazy to me. Billy Wagner, I think he's positioned well to get in, but I sort of figured this would happen. I figured it would be on a razor's edge. It would be like right on a knife edge. He's either going to get in by a couple votes or he's going to just miss out by a couple votes. Came up, tails this time, and he just missed out by a couple votes. Gary Sheffield also got to about 64%. Is now going to fall off the ballot because this was his 10th year. And then I think there were really no surprises in guys that fell off from the first year. But I think it's interesting to talk about some of the guys that even got votes, which is absolutely astounding to me. Jose Bautista got 6 votes. Victor Martinez got 6 votes. Bartolo Colon got 5 votes. That's crazy. Matt Holliday, I actually figured would be one of the ones that would garner some votes from this group, and he got 4. That's kind of crazy. Agon got 3. Brandon Phillips, I think, is egregious. He got 1, and then James Shields and Jose Reyes didn't get a single vote. David Wright actually does get to stick around, I believe. He finished with
Mm-hmm.
6% of the vote, so he's right there. Torrey Hunter also was one. I think that was projected by a lot of people to fall off, and he did not. So he stays around 7%.
That was his fourth year on the ballot too, so
I know
he's just
he's
staying.
kind of kicking around. I think he could potentially be a case later on down the line, but I think there's some guys positioned well, and a few that I also thought would garner more of the vote. And I think thinking back on it now, a lot of voters would likely take your position from the last podcast, which I think was an interesting one on Chase Utley, because I think of everyone else on this that has no question marks around them, Chase Utley for me is like the number one, and to me he feels like he will likely be the next Scott Rowland sort of case. And you said, okay, look, if we're voting for 10, I think Utley has a chance later, and I think he'll stick around regardless, so I'm not going to vote
Mhm.
for him this time. Um, but I think he's one that has a legitimate chance. But he also got a lower percentage than I expected. I expected a little bit of a higher 30s percentage, and he's sub 30 right now, which is a little crazy, 28.8%. But I think Utley has a chance in the future. And then when we talk here in a second, I think he's going to be an important case study for a couple more guys. And they've also announced the projected 2025 Hall of Fame ballot, which we can talk about now, if that's okay with you.
Let's do
I
it.
can put it on the screen. And it is Ichiro Suzuki, CC Sabathia, Curtis Granderson, King Felix Hernandez, Ian Kinsler, and Dustin Pedroia, Hanley Ramirez, Troy Tulowitzki, Rockies legend, Ben Zobrist, Melky Cabrera, Adam Jones, and Russell Martin. And I've been kind of waffling in our group chat all day about some interesting Hall of Fame cases here, but let's start with the easy ones. Which ones do you think are automatic, like they're going to be in the Hall of Fame?
Ichiro and CC, I think, are the clear ones. Ichiro, one of the best contact hitters, all around players of all time, and CC Sabathia, he got 3,000 strikeouts, and I think that's all you really need nowadays.
Yeah, I think those two are the ones that are locks. And then I've said it a million times in this group chat at this point that I think there's a lot of really interesting cases with this ballot, because the more that we get into like the modern era, you have to start looking at players a little bit differently. Obviously, Ichiro is going to get in. He had 3,000 hits. He's one of the game's most beloved players. CC 3,000 strikeouts. Like those are the counting stats that get you in. But you can also look at someone like Felix Hernandez. And I like this specifically. And I'm going to keep going back to Mauer because what you said is really resonating with me, because Mauer is getting in specifically based on his peak and then kind of accumulating some counting stats when he was a really average to below average first baseman. Felix Hernandez, I think, has a legitimate chance here if you're going to consider this, even though I think on WAR he's pretty similar to Mark Burley, but obviously one of the most dominant peaks of all time for any starting pitcher.
Yeah, definitely.
Which ones do you think? Nice ant, bro. Which one of these guys do you think you could make a case for?
I feel like Felix probably has the best case, just given his peak as a pitcher. The rest of the guys are, I think, lacking in terms of longevity. Most of the guys really just got destroyed by injuries, like Pedroia and Tulowitzki. Hanley Ramirez seemed to get old really fast. I don't know why Melky Cabrera is even on there.
Melky shouldn't even be on there, because not only was he probably like the least acclaimed of any of these players, he also had a steroid suspension. So he shouldn't even be on here, which is outrageous to me. For me, one of the ones that sticks out, and obviously for specific reasons, but I think Ben Zobrist is one of the most interesting Hall of Fame cases that we're going to see in a long time. And I think if he sticks around on the ballot, I think he's going to go the full 10 years, and I think he's genuinely going to have a chance to get in. And I think Ben Zobrist, the question here is how you really judge a player, because Ben Zobrist, like I said it in a group chat earlier, and I'm sure that elicited a couple weird looks, but I think you could almost even put Ben Zobrist in as a trailblazer, because he really changed how we view utility players and how WAR is accumulated and calculated based on what position you play. And Ben Zobrist, I think, is a huge case study for that. Like, the problem with him, I think he's around 44 to 45 Baseball Reference WAR. Doesn't have like crazy counting stats, but he's always a high on base percentage guy. Those guys are getting looked at differently now. We can see Bobby Abreu kind of still kicking around. He's a huge on base percentage guy, clutch, multiple World Series MVP. And he's basically the first legitimate super utility player that got recognition for being a super utility player. The only thing that really kind of goes against Ben Zobrist is he was a really late bloomer. So he only really started accumulating WAR once he sort of got closer to his 30s and then late into his 30s. He played till he was like 38, 39. I think Ben Zobrist, if you're going to have this conversation and he sticks around, I think you can make an easy case like, okay, this guy, based on what he did to change the game for a lot of these guys that we still see now, like Tommy Edman, for example. Tommy Edman is more or less a newer age Ben Zobrist. A lot of these guys now carving out a career because of Ben Zobrist. I think you can easily make a case for him here. I think also with the Mauer thing, and depending on how you view counting stats, you can also, if you really wanted to stretch it, you could make somewhat of a case for Russell Martin. He's one of the better defensive catchers of all time since they've started measuring that. And that's if you want to go by Fangraphs WAR. I think he's close to 50-ish.
Yeah.
Like you could, I think it might be 54. Like that's
Yep.
relatively close. You could try to make a case for Russell Martin. And then obviously I think Kinsler and Pedroia have a chance, but that heavily depends on how Chase Utley's Hall of Fame candidacy goes. I think a
Yeah.
lot of these guys will end up sticking around for a while, and it's going to make the ballots a little complicated.
Yeah. I think looking at Jaws in general, Ben Zobrist seems like he's a little far away from that because both
Yeah,
Kinsler and Pedroia are above him
but
and
that's
above the,
that's because he's getting viewed as a second baseman when Ben Zobrist is a super utility kind of guy. I
sure.
think it's that makes the case a little bit weirder. Like I think Kinsler and Pedroia on Jaws aren't super far off, but Zobrist, I mean, yeah, he's mostly a second baseman, but he played everything. So it's kind of weird to just base that there on Jaws, which sucks because that's the main thing that I've been looking at too. It just makes it really complicated.
Yeah, no, I totally get your argument. I just feel like he will eventually fall short, and I don't know if that's
Probably.
my own opinion or if that's like what I think the voters will do. I think Kinsler and Pedroia are more likely to get in, but I think both of them
Mhm.
fall short as well. Kinsler
Yeah.
had a long career, but he was I don't want to say he was mid because he was really good, but
He
when
was
you're
really
comparing
good
him
for a
to
short amount of time, and then he became mid after he was
for a
like
long time, yeah,
34, right?
yeah, and then
Pedroia
Pedroia just
kind of.
had the injuries, but Chase
Mhm.
Utley I think is a large step above them. So I think
Yeah,
he
I do too.
is much more deserving. He's 12th in Jaws. Pedroia and Kinsler are 19 and 20, and Zobrist is 26. So I
Mhm.
think the only Hall of Famers we'll see from this group are Ichiro and Sabathia, but there are definitely some cases for the second baseman and for Felix, who surprisingly is like barely in the top 100 in Jaws, even as a guy with just such an incredible
Starting pitcher
peak.
is just so loaded too.
There have been articles written. One of the articles that I really enjoyed reading a few years ago was just about how we need to change how we're looking at starting pitchers from this generation, like after
Mhm.
like in the 21st century, because the way that they contribute is so much different, and we're comparing them to
Yeah.
past Hall of Famers rather than to their peers. So I think with the current group of starters that we have active that are likely to get into the Hall of Fame, they may change some of the perceptions, but maybe they won't because we're comparing those guys to past Hall of Famers. But hopefully, guys like Kershaw and Verlander and Scherzer and Greinke can sort of set a precedent for different guys to get in. But all those guys had incredible peaks and really long careers where it's like Felix is in
Like
that Johan Santana
super
range, and
dominant peak.
even his peak wasn't as high as Johan's. But yeah, definitely a case there for Felix. I have a feeling he stays on for a few years and then doesn't really make it. But Ichiro and CC should be first ballot guys for sure.
Yeah, I do think they're probably the only two that get in, but I think a lot of these guys could stick around. Like I think Kinsler, Pedroia, I think Felix, I really do think that Zobrist won't get in, but I think if he stays the first year, I think he's going to last all 10 years. I really do think he'll last all 10 years because just the newer age case of how we're going to look at things, and honestly, younger writers kind of finding their way into the BBWAA for voting. I think Zobrist would have a chance to stay around. I know Foolish Baseball has kind of been banging the drum too for a couple years. Like he said, like Zobrist is, I think he said it way back in like 2020 or 2021. He's like, when he was done, he's like, when Ben Zobrist retire, like when he hits the ballot, he's going to be an extremely weird case. And you can make a case that he is a Hall of Famer just on how you view it. I like the Felix thing too, because I mean, judging on every starter from this generation, it's difficult to look at it just because starting pitchers changed now. It's not a guy that you go out there and expect to throw 7 innings regardless if his arm falls off or not. Um, I think it's going to be interesting in the next few years to look at guys like this because not every starter from this past generation is like a CC Sabathia or like a Kershaw. That's a legitimate, huge workhorse. Felix was, and then they just sort of ground him into dust by the time he was 34 and he was just done.
Yeah.
And then even then, COVID also has like a big case against Felix because he was probably going to get a rotation spot with the Braves, and then COVID sort of shut that down because he had a solid spring training that year. looked
Mhm.
like he was going to get a spot, and then COVID shut it down. They went another way, and it just sort of flamed out for him from there. Um, but that's enough Hall of Fame talk. We have our three that got in. We can get back to transactions in the thick of things for the offseason, and we can start talking about the Toronto Blue Jays, who have signed a guy that I feel like has been rumored to be going to them literally since the offseason started, and it's Yariel Rodriguez going to them for 4 years, $32 million. What were your thoughts on this deal, and how do you feel about Yariel Rodriguez and his sort of transition now to Major League Baseball?
Yeah, I mean, I wish I'd gotten to see more of him. Really, the only time I've seen him pitch was in WBC, so maybe I should be happy that we at least got that sort of intro to him in the WBC when he was starting for Team Cuba. He was their ace, but I was under the assumption that he was going to be a reliever and was probably going to be in line to be a setup guy for some teams, maybe a bulk guy or a closer for a select few teams. But it looks like he's going to be a starter for the Blue Jays, which makes sense given their current makeup. They have a rotation that has a couple guys in consideration for that number 5 spot. Now Yariel Rodriguez is in there beside Alek Manoah and Ricky Tiedemann. We've talked enough about Manoah, and Tiedemann's one of the top left-handed pitching prospects in the game. So there's definitely going to be some competition there, but he does give them some more depth, which I think is important when you're relying on a minor leaguer that is yet to make his debut and a major leaguer that just had one of the rockiest seasons I think I've ever seen. But yeah, Yariel Rodriguez is definitely legit. When he played in Japan, he was posting sub-2 ERAs as a reliever and was a pretty solid option there. And when he pitched in the WBC, he looked really great as a starter. So I think he's going to be a guy that probably doesn't throw more than 150 innings next year, which is fine, especially in this day and age, but he should be pretty interesting. And I think definitely is a great fit for this team, especially if things don't work out in the rotation. This is a guy that you can always move to the bullpen, and they've got 4 years to work with him. I think he's only going to be 27 this year. So that's a pretty exciting signing. I think this is a guy that fits on every team, and he fits pretty well with these Blue Jays team as well.
Yeah, I think that the plan for him will be a little bit different this year. I think he's likely going to be sort of flexed, almost like how the Giants just sort of, quite frankly, fucked around with Ross Stripling and Mania. I think he'll sort of be a swingman-ish kind of role, 6th starter sort of thing while they build him up, because he wasn't even like a closer, really reliever in NPB. I also think he's gotten more potential as a reliever, but I think they could build him up to be a solid starter. His career ERA in NPB, which he also played for Junichi, who were pretty bad for a large chunk that he was there. They were like one of the worst teams in the league. He had like a 3.79 ERA, and then that drops all the way to like a 1.61 ERA when he's a reliever. His fastball also has a lot more life out of the pen, which most of those guys do. Like he's sitting like 95 to like 99 out of the pen, and like 91 to 94 as a starter. I think that this is also an opinion of Keegan Matheson, who is one of the huge beat writers for Toronto. He's like, he said he thinks they're just sort of going to give him like a hybrid year where he'll start here and there. He'll probably get like multiple innings in relief, and then they'll build him up so he can start in the future. But I like this guy. I think he's really good. He was really good in the WBC. The guy looks really gnarly. Sliders disgusting. I think he could be really good because there are some question marks around this rotation. And I think he could represent in the future, and maybe even this year if they really need him, a pretty steady hand that sort of bridges the middle to back end of that rotation. And we can move on to talking about the back end of a bullpen, and that is the Houston Astros signing the big jewel, big prize of the relief market in the offseason, which is Josh Hader, who they once had as a prospect, to a 5-year and $95 million deal. Contract is absolutely crazy. The lack of deferrals in this contract makes it the largest contract for a reliever in present day value. Edwin Diaz's deal has more money, but the deferred money dropped it to $93 million. It was $102 million, but now it's 93. So Josh Hader kind of fills our prediction. We both said that we think he's going to chase money. Obviously, and he really kind of deserved it based on how he's done. You said he would be chasing like the highest total money deal. I said I think he would be going for a higher like average annual value in terms of money, I believe was what we said. Um, but he gets $95 million over 5 years, which is crazy. He gets $1 million worth of incentives if he wins the Reliever of the Year award. Extremely attainable for him. It has a full no trade, but the Astros are in the middle of their contention window, so probably not going to be trading it anytime soon. Yeah, this one, oh God, that bullpen is absolutely disgusting in the back end of it.
Yeah, for sure. Just having him alongside Ryan Presley, who's been one of the best closers in baseball for the past few years, and having one of the best up and coming relievers in Brian Abreu just makes the end of that bullpen absolutely crazy, especially considering they literally had no lefties in the past couple of years. So adding Josh Hader just gives them another angle to work from. So that's really crazy. I think it's sort of fitting that a guy like Josh Hader, who has filled somewhat of a villain role for certain members of the podcast, will go to a team that has filled somewhat of a villain role for certain members of the baseball industry. And yeah, I think it's a guy that's definitely deserving of a contract that big. He's been just so incredible throughout his career. 2.50 career ERA, has saved more than 30 ball games 4 different times, and just super consistent, super dominant in terms of strikeouts. And imagine him going to a team that has really good player development, and especially in terms of the pitcher department, bringing Josh Hader there. Like, I feel like he's probably not going to fall off as steep as maybe some of us thought he would in his 30s. But yeah, super crazy. I sort of feel bad for Brian Abreu because he was a guy that I was touting as could take over the closer this year if Presley falters, or was probably almost guaranteed to be the closer next year and would have been one of the best closers in baseball, because I think he's like just by himself as a top 10 reliever in baseball. But because of his role, he goes pretty underrated. And now he's going to be stuck in a setup role for probably the next 5 years. Maybe Hader starts to fall off and Abreu can take over, but his arbitration time's running out pretty quickly. But yeah, the Astros are pretty stacked everywhere, rotation, lineup. And now just adding that to the bullpen just makes it super crazy. I think the biggest thing here, because a lot of the signings we're going to talk about are in the bullpen, the Rangers made none of those additions. And that's like the only spot on their team where you're like, what is
Really
going on
needed
there?
to.
Yeah, because the rotation is solid enough. Obviously they lost Jordan Montgomery, but they do have guys coming up from the minors, and you can always make it up with Dane Dunning as your number 5 and Jacob deGrom coming back from Tommy John surgery. But that lineup is stacked and maybe even too deep in the outfield, but the bullpen is the one area where you're just like, I don't feel too confident about that. And there were so many relievers out there that I think could be had at a reasonable value, and they have not thus far. So it leads me to believe that they're probably going to trade somebody on their offense because they have so many outfielders to go get a reliever that's probably not a clear-cut closer, but somebody who can contribute to the back end of that bullpen. If not, that'd be crazy because they've been absolutely silent this offseason.
Yeah, it sucks too because like what is there in that market now? Because we're going to talk about a couple guys that have come off the board too. Obviously, last podcast we talked about Jordan Hicks, who was another one that we sort of expected to be getting big money as a reliever, and he's getting big money just as a starter. And now Josh Hader's off the board. I think a lot of outlets had him sort of mocked to go to the Rangers because that was their biggest need. They obviously have shown the willingness to spend the money, and then it's like, oh yeah, here you go, division rival is going to get him right now. And now, like, who's legitimately like the best guy that for sure is probably going to be available? Because it seems like it's either going to be Chris Martin or Kenley Jansen, and for me, that's not moving the needle nearly enough. I just don't really know. I think that you're right. I think they will probably have to trade from their outfield depth to sort of fix this because the back end of that bullpen just sucks. Like, it's not good. Their bullpen in general kind of sucks. But yeah, it's a weird one. Astros come out huge winners here. Those games could just be over at points after the 6th inning, going Abreu, Presley, Hader. It's wild.
Yeah, I think if they were to make a trade, the top name available is Emmanuel Clase, who's been
Oh
rumored to
yeah, for
be
sure.
available. So that would be one that I think they could swing too, because a lot of
Yeah,
their top prospects are outfielders. So like, I don't know, like
that'd be
Wyatt
funny too.
Langford is probably not somebody you want to trade, but right now their outfield is like Wyatt Langford, Evan Carter, Leody Taveras, Adolis Garcia, Ezekiel Duran. Like they just have so many outfielders, and I'm sure they have even more in the minor leagues that aren't at the very top of their prospect list. So I feel like they should have no problem going out and getting somebody like Clase, and that would be pretty cool though too, because he started out his career with them.
I know. I was gonna say that would be pretty interesting to see Hader going back to where he started and Clase going back to where they started.
Hmm.
One of the most one-sided of Corey Kluber. That's so crazy. We can talk about another reliever that's come off the board, and it is the Angels staying in the AL West, signing Robert Stevenson, secret weapon Bob Steve, for a 3-year, $33 million deal. It has a conditional club option for 2027, and then it has a weird little thing in here. And it is if he misses 130 consecutive days due to an elbow ligament injury, i.e., Tommy John, the Angels would have a $2.5 million club option for 2027. Robert Stevenson, I think, was one of the darling kind of relievers, really interesting project guys here, and the Angels get him, which means the Angels will blow it. But Robert Stevenson flashed a lot of promise. Honestly, just really, really good at points. So I think this is a good signing in a vacuum, but a weird one for an Angels team that figures to not be very good.
Yeah, I mean they're always going to go for pitchers
They kind of
because
have to, but
yeah.
they really need to stop kicking the can down the road and just trade Mike Trout and just commit to actually rebuilding your
Well,
team.
it's up to him at this point, and he's the one who keeps saying
That's
he doesn't want
true.
to be traded. So, I
That's
mean,
true.
yeah, if he's going to be there, you got to build around him. But yeah, I think any team signing Robert Stevenson is making the smart choice, because he was so incredible after joining the Rays. They told him to throw his slider harder. It turned into more of a cutter, but it turned him into the best reliever in baseball in the second half. Here's a tweet I tweeted on December 3rd. Robert Stevenson in the second half was the best reliever in baseball. He had tossed 24 innings with a 1.50 ERA. He led relievers with a 0.68 whip, a 1.83 xFIP, a 46.4% strikeout rate, a 42.9% strikeout minus walk rate, a 45.6% CSW, a 30.1% swinging strike rate, and a 19% hard hit rate. He was just absolutely dominant. So it's a guy that started out as a starting pitching prospect and really struggled to find his way there, and struggled as a reliever and always seemed to have potential. And of course, the Rays are the ones to get it out of him. I'm glad he got the money that he was well deserving of, but he should close for the Angels. It's just all he really has to do is maintain what he did with the Rays. But
Mhm.
knowing the Angels, they could just be like, "Oh, this worked for you. We don't want you to do that anymore. Actually, we want you to get your elbow chopped off. Actually, that would be best for us."
We would love it if you would try to throw the ball with both hands. And just go up there and lob it at him. It's a great move in a vacuum because he is an extremely good reliever.
Mhm.
It's so tough to trust anything good happening with the Angels because that franchise just feels cursed at this point. Um,
For sure.
we can continue our extremely reliever heavy podcast and talk about a guy that I literally mentioned last podcast, funnily enough, and it's John Brebbia signing with the White Sox. Sorry, John. He signed for a 1-year, $4 million deal. It has a $6 million mutual option in 2025 that includes a $1.5 million buyout. There's $1 million worth of incentives baked into each season, and he begins to unlock these incentives upon hitting 45 appearances, which depending on how they use him, because he's sort of all over the place with the Giants. Very attainable.
I was surprised by how much money he got, because to
Yeah, a little
me,
bit.
he seemed like more of a, I don't know, lower end reliever, but his stats don't really read that way. He was very solid for the Cardinals, struggled in his first year as he made adjustments with the Giants. And then the past couple of years, he's actually been one of their better relievers, despite having like a mixed sort of path to his success and dealing with injuries last year. He was still really great across the past couple of years. 3.47 ERA across 2022 and 2023. That came with a 22.5% strikeout rate, but last year was all the way up at 29%. So I think this is a very solid reliever, but I guess considering where the White Sox are in their uh, window, which is very much tightly closed, they are probably looking to sign guys that they can trade at the deadline. Ugh, am I still on?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I think that this is just a guy that they're going to try to trade at the deadline,
Mhm.
set him up as the closer for half a year, and he should be pretty solid, and then trade him away, and then give the job to Gregory Santos. Gregory Santos is currently their best reliever, and I pegged him as the closer before they had made any additions to the bullpen. And it makes more sense, especially for a team like this, to not have him close, just because it's going to bump up his arbitration price, and that's always heavily in consideration for teams. So I think Brebbia is actually going to be the closer here. Each of the last three guys we talked about, Hader, uh, Stevenson, and Brebbia, are coming into teams where they had a closer in place already last season. Presley for the Astros, Carlos Estevez for the Angels, and Santos for the White Sox. And I think all three of these additions are going to replace these guys. And so that's actually pretty interesting, especially in terms of fantasy. John Brebbia's ADP about to jump from like zero, like infinity, like he's never been drafted, way up into like the top 300 for sure.
Yeah, they actually have some guys that are sort of interesting at the back end of that bullpen, which is weird for a team that has no chance. Brebbia, Crochet's supposed to come back, and then Gregory Santos. I like Brebbia. I mean, he doesn't walk anybody. That's kind of good. Doesn't walk like literally anyone. I think like
That team's going to be so bad. I think they
oh,
might rival the A's.
they're gonna be complete dog shit. It's gonna be great.
It's going to be
Yeah,
like
I
the
like
Royals last year, where it was like they were trying to win. Well, I
terrible,
don't think
terrible
the White
team
Sox
and
will.
awful vibes.
Yeah, but like
This is what they
where,
need John Brebbia for, because John Brebbia
yeah,
is a great vibes guy. That guy is hilarious. If you've ever listened
sure,
to any of his like dugout
yeah,
interviews, that guy's the goat.
the boy.
So
But more so, like the A's were actively trying to lose, where it's like the Royals were actively trying to win, and then they
they
were
just got
as bad as the
yeah,
A's. I don't think the White Sox are actively trying to win, but I think they will be
I agree, man.
similar in production to the A's.
I think you're right. I think they're going to be pretty terrible. A team hoping to not be terrible this year, unlike most every other year, is the Pittsburgh Pirates, who signed Aroldis Chapman to a 1-year, $10.5 million deal to sort of try to add something to the back end of that bullpen to help bridge the gap from all the other guys, to Colin Holderman, to David Bednar, because the Pirates started out so hot last year and then just completely fell apart. Aroldis Chapman, man, this guy is. We really kind of hate that guy, but he's going to play with Pirates, who unfortunately are a cool vibes team.
Yeah.
Yeah,
He definitely had a renaissance last year. So that from like a baseball perspective, that
good
was
player.
cool. Yeah, no, yeah, it
Big
was cool
time.
from a baseball perspective. He won a World Series. I think it's a great move for the Pirates. Like I said, just strictly from a baseball perspective, because while their bullpen was pretty solid, it had a lot of unproven guys that had a lot of potential. And those guys were setting up David Bednar, who was one of the best closers in baseball. And Chapman did really well in a setup role last year, and keeping him in a setup role should be pretty solid. And yeah, this bullpen I actually really like, and I think it's going to
Mhm.
become even more apparent how good it is next year as names like Colin Holderman and Dory Moretta and Carmen Władzinski become more household names alongside Bednar and Chapman. But from the outside perspective, outside of baseball, it's not a great move. I don't want any team to sign Aroldis Chapman. But you know, when it comes to trying to win ball games, and I don't know, I guess you got to go get him. But yeah, it sucks that he's going to a fun team like this, because it's like you want to root for everybody on the Pirates, and then it's like they give you a guy to root against. So it makes it a little bit hard. Put him on the freaking Dodgers.
Yeah, I mean they already have one guy that's already beat his girlfriend up. They might as well add another one. So
Are you talking about Ji Hwan
Ji-Hwan
Bae?
Bae, yeah, Ji-Hwan
Yeah,
Bae.
nobody knows about that one.
Yeah. By the way, if you didn't know that, Ji-Hwan Bae beat his girlfriend up.
Beat his Bay.
Well, shut up, Jake. We
Not a
don't
place for
joke. We
jokes.
don't. Yeah, we don't joke about it. Yeah. I don't know. So I did see a really funny tweet that was It was like one of the blowout like football score lines, and it was like a player on the team that's getting blown out, celebrating getting like a first down or a touchdown or whatever, and it was Colin Holderman and Aroldis Chapman celebrating after throwing a scoreless eighth and ninth as the Pirates lose 7-9. I was like, great.
Yeah.
It seems excellent. We can talk
I
about
think
the
they'll be
Dodgers.
better next year.
I do too. I think we can talk about the Dodgers now. Unfortunately, they have signed James Paxton to a 1 year, $11 million deal. He'll get $1 million bonus if he's active on opening day, which seems extremely funny. $500,000 bonus if he returns by April 15th. There's $1 million worth of incentives baked in there. It's $250,000 for reaching 16 and 18 starts each, and if he gets to 20 starts, he'll make another $500,000. I don't know why, but giving them $1 million bonus, like if you can actually play baseball on the first day that you're supposed to be able to play baseball, I'll give you $1 million.
Yeah.
Paxton, but I mean it's very justified because he has not played a whole lot of baseball, to be honest, in the last few years.
Yeah, and then also like the incentives for starts are pretty funny as well because they're going to give him the most money for reaching 20 starts, and he hasn't reached 20 starts since 2019. So it's been a good 5 years now. Last year he almost made it there, 19 starts. But yeah, I think we know what James Paxton's going to be when he's healthy. He's going to be pretty solid because to start the season for the Red Sox, he was really great, and then he started facing injuries and everything went downhill from there across his final few starts. But I think he's pretty dominant. Putting him on a team like the Dodgers, where they're really good at their workload management and they have sort of the depth with all the young guys they have at the back end of their rotation to help take the load off Paxton, I think it's going to work really well. He's sort of going to be like their proxy Kershaw, which this doesn't preclude them from bringing him back, but it's like, why would you want two guys that are like that? Obviously Kershaw a lot better than Paxton, but they're both very similar in that you're guaranteed that they're going to get injured, and when they are pitching healthy, they're going to be pretty solid. But clearly if this was a team that was in consideration to bring back Kershaw, bringing in Paxton makes a lot of sense too. It really fits in with the rotation. You obviously got the guys on the top, like Yamamoto, and I can't remember anybody. My Fangraphs isn't loading. Yes, and Glass now. Okay, they just got all the injury guys. They're just gonna hope for 100 innings from their best guys, and you have Yamamoto just dominate through the whole year. They're gonna find a way to make it work because they have enough young guys. Even after losing, Emmett Sheehan was the one who went to the Rays in the Glass now deal?
I think so.
Yeah, I mean they still have enough guys outside of that, like Bobby Miller and no, it was Ryan Pepio went to the Rays. They still have Emmett Sheehan, but they have enough guys, Gavin Stone as well, that they're going to be able to eat 75 to 100 innings as well to just figure everything out from there. So this makes sense. It fits a theme of them liking guys that are good when they pitch and when they're healthy, and you're not really expecting many innings out of them.
Yeah, there's a lot to like about it because I mean, Paxton is a guy that a team like this can really afford to gamble on because he's realistically penciled in where 4 or 5. He's either your 4th starter or your 5th starter.
I see 5th because they're getting Buehler back too.
That's right. So I mean, he looks like he's going to be your 5th starter. Also, in case you're unaware of just who their head of pitching, their big pitching coach is Mark Pryor, and he's absolutely ridiculously good at his job. He's made guys that are dog water like Noah Syndergaard look like an actual pitcher still. He fixed Jake McGee. Like there's so many things that Mark Pryor's done that realistically, if you just get innings out of James Paxton, you can kind of figure that he's going to be good. They have guys that sort of fill a lot of swingman roles too that can just eat a lot of innings. You talked about Emmett Sheehan. You talked about Gavin Stone. There's still Ryan Yarbrough.
And they'll have Dustin May back at some point later in the year.
Yes, I mean it's such a good 1-year deal, and honestly, for the money, it feels like a major steal. If he just pitches, which I mean, $11 million, that's really, really cheap for Paxton. I think it's a good move. It sucks that he's going to be on the Dodgers because he's going to be good. They're gonna fix him, and he's going to be really solid when he pitches. And it's just not really fix him. It'll probably make him even better. He was good when he pitched last year. He just didn't do it enough. But yeah, it's a solid move for the Dodgers here. We can talk about another $11 million move, and it's podcast favorite Joey Gallo signing to a 1-year, $11 million deal with the Nationals, which blew up my predictions because I had the next player we're going to talk about right after this one signing there. But Gallo signs with the Nats, so they can hopefully have him be good and then flip him at the deadline because that's exactly what they're going to do with him.
Yeah, I'm still struggling to pull up team pages on roster resource, but yeah, Gallo is definitely a guy that is going to hit home runs. It's crazy that he's still getting $11 million. He's not just a home run hitter; he is a pretty decent outfielder too.
Mhm.
But this just does seem like another case of a team bringing in a guy for 1 year and hoping to trade him. They did this last year, though. We saw them do it with they had Josh Bell and uh, Jaimer Candelario, and they were able to trade. No, the Guardians had Josh Bell. They had Candelario and somebody else that I can't recall right now. And they were able to deal Candelario at the very least for prospects, and I think that's what they're hoping to do. Continue to stack the system, and even if things don't work out, it's just like you have a guy on your team that makes your team better. So it's one of those deals where there's not too many implications, and it's more so just hoping for Gallo to have a big year and then for the team to make the right move and trade at the deadline. But yeah, other than that, it's not like Gallo's turning the Nationals into a pennant winning team, or you know, I don't know, completely changing the landscape of baseball or something.
Yeah, Joey Gallo is one of my favorite baseball players of all time because he's literally the funniest three-true outcome hitter of all time. He literally he have you seen his stats from last year, Jake?
No, I've been trying to pull them up. Actually,
Mm.
I did have them up. Do you want to ask me a question? I won't look at them.
Yes. He uh he I'm gonna give you a little fun trivia, Jake. And it's built into a question, and it's most strikeouts per hit with any player with 2,000 plus plate appearances. There's a top three. Where do you think Joey Gallo fits here? And what do you
I think
think what do you think the strikeouts per hit for him is?
strikeouts per hit.
Strikeouts per hit
Um,
for Joey Gallo.
I feel like his strikeouts per hit got to be 2 to 1.
It's over 2 to 1.
Oh my, yeah.
It's 2 1/4. It's 2.28
And
to
what was
one
the minimum plate appearances?
2,000.
I feel like
It's the highest
he's
all
got to be
time.
number one. Yeah.
He is number one. He's the only one over two, funnily enough.
Wow.
It's 2.28 for Gallo, Mike Zunino, Miguel Sano, and then it's absolute who's guys that just strike out a ton. Chris Carter, Jeff Mathis, Rob Deere, Russell Branyan, guys like Chris Davis, Austin
Yeah.
Hedges.
Speaking
Like,
of Miguel Sano, he signed with the Angels.
nice. Shout out to that guy. Since I saw another extremely dumb stat. Uh per 162, he's averaging 223 strikeouts a season. He's striking out 220, almost
That's
225
crazy.
times a year.
Yeah. He was
I
striking
like
out almost 43% of the time last year, and it's like
pretty
he's had
solid.
a sub 200 batting average for 4 straight seasons.
Yeah, you know what you're gonna get with Joey Gallo, though. He's a three true
Oh, he's
outcome
not a
guy.
good defender anymore. He's
No,
a
he's not.
bad defender now. Oh, man.
He dealt with a lot of injury last year, though, and he sort of played a lot of like corner outfield, um, like with the Twins, which that outfield is weird. It's not like the best. A lot of guys kind of struggle defensively in that outfield, and he got cursed because he played for the Twins, where every single hitter on that team got hurt.
Oh, yeah.
So still, yeah. I still like this move in a vacuum. You know what you're getting with Joey Gallo. You can kind of bank on it because they kind of had some success with Schwarber. Like he kind of went off then, and they're similar-ish players. Obviously, Schwarber's better, but Joey Gallo, I mean, if he hits you 30-something home runs and he strikes out 1,000,000% of the time, then you're still kind of okay with it as long as he's a usable defender. Everyone's sort of okay with that. Like nobody's expecting Joey Gallo to turn into Tony Gwynn at this point. Nobody's like, oh, don't strike out, Joey Gallo. You know what you're getting with him. Just kind of get over it. If he's the kind of player you hate, I hate you. So, Joey Gallo, don't ever disrespect my goat like that ever again.
Wow.
best baseball player of all time. I am very upset that the Nationals signed him instead of this guy because it ruined my prediction. But the Brewers signed Rhys Hoskins to a 2-year, $34 million deal. There is an opt out after 2024, so realistically, like a 1-1, almost like a weird sort of deal here. But I think this deal, based on just pure money wise, I think this is one of the steals of the offseason. His contract is extremely cheap for a guy like Rhys Hoskins, who coming off of injury, I still think he's really good and desperately fits the Brewers' need for more power, more home runs, because they were not a very good offense last year. But yeah, it's a really, really big get for the Brewers here.
Super. Yeah, totally agree. He's we're probably going to be pretty surprised by how well he adjusts to coming back. I mean, he was such a consistently good player over the past few years and throughout his career that I think he goes to Milwaukee and hits 25 to 30 home runs, bats 245, and just is a very solid player. And they get him for 2 years. He'll probably opt out after that first year, in my opinion, just to guarantee himself a multi-year deal. But just a year without seeing him, I think people will forget how good he is. But yeah, this fulfills my prediction. I had him going to the Brewers as my first correct team prediction. It just felt so right, especially with them losing Rowdy Tellez. And I thought Hoskins would be cheaper than what the market would usually ask for a guy like that. So I think he fits really well there. He has great numbers in their stadium as well. So that means he could have a really big year, but that lineup isn't super strong, but he fits super well with this team. And it made a lot of sense in my opinion. But yeah, I think it's cool. I'm excited to have Rhys Hoskins back this year because he's been, I think, a very underrated player throughout his career.
Definitely. So also one of the greatest bat slams of all time. That guy's huge energy guy, loved in Philly for the most part. So, I mean, he's a huge get. Brewers fans should be extremely happy with this one. I'm extremely bummed because Brewers should never be happy. But yeah, we have one more move to talk about, and we can go back to the Angels, adding to their bullpen to join Bob Steve, and it's Matt Moore signing again with the Angels. This time, 1 year's $9 million. And Matt Moore was really good last year. Sort of flew under the radar for the most part, except for fantasy, where he was a huge pickup a lot of the time. He was really good for me until he died about midseason. So Matt Moore adds to this bullpen, likely setting up for Bob Steve.
Yeah, he's been really good in each of the past 2 seasons. Last year, sub 3 ERA. Year before, he had a sub 2 ERA. And it's crazy that this late into his career in his mid-30s, he's finally figuring things out. Because if you remember, this was the number one prospect in baseball, ahead of guys like Bryce Harper and Mike Trout way back in the day. So it's really crazy that while he struggled for a long time as a starter, now he's finally figuring things out as a reliever super late in his career. I thought it's pretty wild that he was able to get $9 million, but that makes sense given that he was very good in each of the past 2 seasons. I don't think he will close, considering that he was on the Angels last year with the same setup, minus Robert Stevenson, and didn't close. Exactly. He had no saves last year and he played for 3 different teams. So I don't expect him to close at all. I think he's just going to be the top left-handed option there behind Carlos Estevez and Robert Stevenson. But he definitely fits well, especially on a team that really is always in need of pitching. So just keep bringing them in, and maybe things will go right now that Ohtani's gone. He was just holding them back.
Maybe so. Their bullpen, they've added some pretty interesting guys in there. Matt Moore has been really underrated the last couple of years. We already talked about Bob Steve. They also added Luis Garcia and Adam Simber. So there are guys in that bullpen that can get out. So it's just the division is hard. The Angels are still bad. Their lineup does not look good. I don't know. That team is such a nightmare. And maybe this will be their year. Maybe this will be the year that everything works for the Angels. That is all of our transactions to talk about, and that only leaves us with one thing. We had Matt Moore to set it up, and now we can bring in the closer.
Great transition. Pretty crazy that we are at the closing point. It feels like a
sub 1 hour podcast after last week's marathon.
Yeah, it really feels a lot shorter just exactly because of that. But yeah, we can get into bringing the closer. And this week we've got Todd Worrell, um, who had an 11-year career from 1985 to 1997, during which he pitched for the Cardinals and the Dodgers. He was drafted by the Cardinals in the first round, 21st overall of the 1982 draft, and debuted in August of 1985 versus the Reds at the age of 25. He tossed 1 2/3 scoreless innings, allowing just a hit, walking nobody and striking out nobody. He featured a mid 90s fastball and an upper 80s slider, and that's what he worked with throughout his career. And he was actually a sensation in limited sample in his debut campaign, tossing 21 2/3 innings, but he had a 2.91 ERA with 5 saves. And then in the World Series, which the Cardinals lost, he tied the World Series record by striking out 6 consecutive batters. He carried over that success from his debut into his first full season in 1986. He tossed a career high 103 2/3 innings with a 2.08 ERA, a 1.23 whip, and 36 saves, which led the National League, as well as 60 games finished, which also led the National League. Those 36 saves set a rookie saves record, which helped him to win the National League Rookie of the Year award and the National League Raw Age Relief Man of the Year award, and finished 16th in National League MVP award voting. Just an incredible first full season for Worrell. And then he maintained that consistent success over the next 3 seasons. 1987, 2.66 ERA, 33 saves, and a career high 92 strikeouts. And he became the first pitcher ever with 30 saves in each of his first 2 full seasons. 1988, he had a 3 ERA and 32 saves, where he earned his first All-Star selection. And then in 1989, he had a 2.96 ERA and 20 saves, but his season was cut short due to a UCL injury that required Tommy John surgery. He would miss all of 1990 and 1991 because of that surgery, and then a later rotator cuff injury. So now at 32 years old in 1992, Worrell returned for the final year of his career in St. Louis. And he actually looked just as strong as he did pre-injury, despite serving as the setup man to Lee Smith, who they acquired while Worrell was injured. He had a 2.11 ERA and a career best 1.09 whip to go with just 3 saves, but that allowed him to set the franchise record with 129 saves as a Cardinal, which would later be broken by the aforementioned Lee Smith. Then prior to 1993, he signed a 3-year deal with the Dodgers. Worrell battled injuries and struggled on the field across the first 2 years, and his contract was looking like a major bust. 1993, he had a 6.05 ERA and just 5 saves. 1994, a little better, 4.29, still just 11 saves, and that was the strike-shortened season. However, he bounced back across the following 2 years to recuperate the value he had lost in his early years in Hollywood. 1995, he had a career best 2.02 ERA and 32 saves to earn his second All-Star selection. And then 1996, he had what is considered the best year of his career. He had a 3.03 ERA, a major league and career high 44 saves, and a National League leading 67 games finished. He earned his third and final All-Star selection, finished 5th in National League Cy Young Award voting, and 21st in National League MVP award voting. And then the final year of his career in 1997, he struggled to a 5.28 ERA, but still managed to rack up 35 more saves, which allowed him to set another franchise record as he racked up 127 saves with the Dodgers, which would later be broken by Jeff Shaw, and I'm sure was broken by Kenley Jansen a few years ago. But that would wrap up a career during which he racked up 10.9 Baseball Reference WAR across 693 2/3 innings, while striking out 628 batters with a 3.09 ERA, a 1.23 whip, and 256 saves, which is good for 37th on the all-time saves leaderboard.
The only fun fact that I could find about him is he actually is tied for the record in the World Series for most consecutive strikeouts.
I said that.
I know, 6. The other guys have the craziest baseball names that just are super weird. Mo Dobrowski and Hod Eller. Like, these guys are made up.
Hod?
Those are MLB. Hod Eller. Yeah. Sick names, big dog. That's it for all of our podcasts. Also had an excellent mustache. I don't know if you saw the pictures of him. Mustache pod. That's all we have for this episode of Free Baseball presented by the Athletes Hub. And since we are presented by the Athletes Hub, we are obligated to tell you to go follow the Twitter account at Athletes Hub, and check out the website. More content should be rolling out relatively soon. You can check that out at theathleteshub.org. You can check us out on Twitter at mine is TVS Bird. I do stuff. I've lately been complaining about the Hall of Fame. And you can check out Jake Crumpler, where you can find more productive stuff like all the cool stats that he provided earlier, which he does for a cajillion different sites. Well,
yeah, you can check out baseballhq.com, where I do playing time analysis for the Giants, A's, Diamondbacks, and Angels. And most importantly, go check out pitcherlist.com. Just incredible work coming out of there all the time. Podcasts, articles, just everything you would need to know. Player pages, the best in the industry. And then also we've got PitchCon going on right now, which is a 5-day conference during which we have panels throughout the day. It's like 10 hours each day of just baseball panels, fantasy baseball panels, just everybody in the industry. We had Jeff Passan on today. Later, we'll have some of the biggest podcasters in the industry, like from Effectively Wild, my favorite podcast. Just basically everybody in the baseball industry is going to be on PitchCon, and it's great, completely free. We're also trying to raise money for ALS. Our goal is $10,000 for the ALS Foundation. We reached that last year, so we're hoping to do that again. So definitely come and support, either just with your presence or also with your donations. But it's a great event. I'll be on Friday at like 9 p.m. Eastern, just after I get off work. But definitely go check that out, and also follow me on Twitter at Jake Crumpler.
Definitely. That's all we have to add for this episode of the podcast. We'll see you next time, next Wednesday around the same time.